All right, with just how good the Seattle Seahawks are playing right now, even without Russell Wilson and the trade and having Geno Smith playing this good, it is a friendly reminder of just how good of a coach Pete Carroll is. And I think we forget that sometimes and take it for granted. I think Pete Carroll might be the greatest, yes, the greatest coach in Seattle professional sports history. And I don't know if that's much of a debate, but we're going to take a look here. And I decided to do the Mount Rushmore of Seattle sports coaches. Now, that's 4 coaches. For those who are not familiar with Mount Rushmore, how it works, you get 4 spots on Mount Rushmore. So you can't have 5, you can't have 6. It's just the 4 greatest coaches in Seattle sports history. And I'm keeping it to professional sports because I think that Don James from the University of Washington would definitely be on this list if I was doing college and professional sports. But I thought I would keep it simple where we're only doing professional sports. So that is the Seattle Mariners, Seahawks, Sonics, or the artist formerly known as the Sonics now. And then we got, of course, the Seattle Storm, the MLS, Seattle Sounders, and the Kraken, probably 2 new. And I'm not going to go all the way back to the Seattle Metropolitans when they won their Stanley Cup in 19 or 1920, because I don't even know who their coach is back then. So we're just going to keep it pretty much recent days and the Seattle Supersonics. First, I want to go through an honorable mention, maybe a few honorable mentions. One of the honorable mentions that is not going to make it on this list is George Carroll. He led the Sonics to the 1996 NBA Finals. I love George Carroll. He was my first favorite coach growing up because of being a Sonics fan, and that's like kind of this first or second team I fell in love with as I was growing up. But he's not going to make it. He's an honorable mention. Don James, as I said, it's college, so he's an honorable mention because I'm not doing college coaches. Jim Mora from the Seahawks is the last on the list because he might be the worst coach. And other than that, I mean, we've had actually kind of a slew of forgettable coaches in Seattle. The Paul Westfalls, the Bickerstaffs of the world. We've had some forgettable coaches. PJ Carlissimo, forgettable coaches in general. Nate McMillan, not forgettable, but not good enough to be on this list. All right, so let's start off with the Mount Rushmore. We're going to keep it easy with number 1 because I already said he's the greatest coach in Seattle sports history, and that has to be Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll, I think, is the greatest coach in Seattle history. He has a Super Bowl. It's been now 10 years of excellence. He took over a franchise that was struggling because of Jim Mora kind of tore it apart after the Mike Holmgren era. And I feel like in general, this era of Seattle football is the best era of any sports team in Seattle professional history. It's just 10 years of excellence. It's not just winning a Super Bowl, but it's the amount of time we've been good. And now the second resurgence with Geno Smith. I don't know how good we'll be this year. We're only 3-3 at the moment, but looking like we won the Russell Wilson trade. Pete Carroll is getting that spot on the Mount Rushmore, and that one is easy. Number 2, let's keep it to the Seattle Seahawks, and that's Mike Holmgren. When Holmgren took the job from the Green Bay Packers to come to Seattle, it was kind of a surprise to many people because to leave an organization like Green Bay and go to an organization like Seattle that had frankly never won anything in the past was kind of a big deal to a lot of people. He brought in Matt Hasselbeck with him, and there was some times there with struggle when Trent Dilfer was the starter, but we went to a Super Bowl. We made it to multiple playoff runs. We had a team that was built on the West Coast offense and a lot of running. Sean Alexander, Walter Jones, tough-nosed football. I loved Mike Holmgren's era, and I think without the Mike Holmgren era and building something special, I don't know if Pete Carroll would have ever left USC to come to Seattle and build this, really successful team and successful organization. So Mike Holmgren gets a number 2 spot on my list for the Seattle Mount Rushmore. Number 3 is Lenny Wilkens. Lenny Wilkens was a player coach at one point. I think he may still be one of the all-time leaders, if not the all-time leaders in wins and losses in NBA history. But he brought the Seattle Supersonics a championship as a head coach in 1979. And overall, he might be a forgotten figure because, it's so long ago. Pete Carroll 2000s, Mike Holmgren 2000s. the next guy on my list was also 90s and 2000s or early 2000s. So they're very, very recent. So you have to go all the way back to the 1970s for Lenny Wilkens. But he did bring an NBA championship. He was a player coach. He's an NBA Hall of Famer. He's one of the best Sonics of all time, basketball-wise and probably coach-wise. And you saw the ovation during the preseason Clippers and Blazers game. He's still beloved in the community. Lenny Wilkens gets the third spot on my Seattle Mount Rushmore. And fourth on the Seattle Mount Rushmore is the Seattle Mariners' best manager of all time, and that's Lou Piniella. Look, we should have and could have and had opportunities to make a World Series and win a World Series. So I don't know if Sweet Lou underachieved at his time with Seattle. It's hard to say that because he took over in an organization that had never made the playoffs, and then from 95 to 2001 we made the playoffs, and I believe he's the only manager in Seattle Mariners history before Scott Service did this year to make a playoff, so he has to get some credit for that. He coached he coached that 95 team that made Seattle fall in love. He kind of helped with Ken Griffey Jr. save Seattle baseball. Lou Piniella was, Sweet Lou, fan favorite, fiery manager, great interviewer. He kind of made Seattle fun with baseball. I mean, whether or not we won a World Series or got to a World Series with the amount of talent we had, Lou Piniella deserved a spot on this. And I'm just going to confirm something. 2001 Seattle Mariners manager, and the 2001 Seattle Mariners manager was Lou Piniella. So yeah, Lou Piniella was part of that 2001 team. So he was the only manager before Scott Service to ever take the Seattle Mariners to the playoffs. So that means something. I mean, you had Randy Johnson. I mean, this guy, if you go look at the players that Lou Piniella also managed, it's pretty remarkable. Alex Rodriguez, Ken Griffey Jr., Randy Johnson, Edgar Martinez, Jay Buhner, to name a few, Ichiro Suzuki, just Hall of Famers after Hall of Famers after Hall of Famers. So yeah, it's kind of sad that he never got to the World Series with the Mariners after, being part of that big red machine in Cincinnati, but he still gets a lot of credit for helping rebuild this Mariners organization, and I think saving baseball in Seattle. So once again, our Seattle Mount Rushmore coaches are Pete Carroll, Mike Holmgren, Lou Piniella, and Lenny Wilkens. I'm sorry about that. So that is the Mount Rushmore of Seattle sports coaches, and I'm George Urger, part of a Sports on Tap Seattle. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.